Hello everyone, welcome to Prelims Warm-Up. This initiative has brought to you by Aptiplus Academy for Civil Services, and my name is Shaikh Datta. I am the faculty for Geography and Environment at Aptiplus Academy for Civil Services. So in this initiative, we are looking at 5 questions every day, which have been asked in the previous year UPSC Prelims examination. So today also we have 5 questions which have been asked in the previous year UPSC Prelims examination. So let us start with the first question for today. The first question that we get to see was asked in the UPSC Prelims examination of 2019. The question asks, on 21st of June, the sun, okay, on 21st of June, the sun, now what happens to the sun on the 21st of June? A, it does not set below the horizon at the Arctic Circle. B, it does not set below the horizon at the Antarctic Circle. C, it shines vertically overhead at noon on the equator. And D, it shines vertically overhead at the Tropic of Capricorn. So all of you must be aware about things like summer solstice, winter solstice, spring equinox, and the autumn equinox. So 21st June, it corresponds to what? It corresponds to summer solstice, which basically means that during this point of time, the sun will be vertically overhead over the Tropic of Cancer. And since the sun is vertically overhead over the Tropic of Cancer, we will get to see that A should be the right answer. That is, the sun will not set below the horizon at the Arctic Circle. Let us look at the explanation. On 21st of June, the sun is directly over the Tropic of Cancer. Geometrically, it means that the sun is normal, that is 90 degree to the Tropic of Cancer, and it makes an angle of 47 degree to the Arctic Circle. As such, the sun is above the horizon for all areas north of the Arctic Circle. Okay? Sun will always remain above the horizon for every single point which is present above the, like latitudinally above the Arctic Circle. The entire area in the Arctic Circle experiences day. The North Pole is inclined towards the sun, and the places beyond the Arctic Circle, experience continuous daylight for about 6 months. Since a large portion of the northern hemisphere is getting light from the sun, it is summer in the regions north of the equator. The longest day and the shortest night at these places occur on the 21st of June. At this time, in the southern hemisphere, all these conditions will be reversed. So whatever is happening in the northern hemisphere, all these conditions will be reversed because it is the winter season in the southern hemisphere. And what happens as a result of that? The nights are longer than the days, and this position is called as the summer solstice. So summer solstice, winter solstice, or let's say if we talk about autumn equinox or the spring equinox, all these names are on the basis of what season is being experienced in the northern hemisphere. Okay, so what did we understand? Okay, during 21st of June, the sun is directly over the Tropic of Cancer. Geometrically, it means that the sun is normal, that is at 90 degrees to the Tropic of Cancer, and it will make an angle of 47 degree to the Arctic Circle. All as such, the sun is above the horizon for all areas which are lying to the north of the Arctic Circle. The entire area in the Arctic Circle, it will experience day for 6 months. Continuous daylight will be there for 6 months. Okay, the North Pole is inclined towards the sun, and the places beyond the Arctic Circle, they will experience continuous daylight for about 6 months. And since a large portion of the northern hemisphere is getting light from the sun, it is summer in the regions north of the equator. The longest day and the shortest night at these places will occur on the 21st of June. Remember this, because 21st of June, highest amount of sunlight will reach the places which are lying to the north of the equator. So the northern hemisphere will experience the longest day and the shortest night on the 21st of June. And at this time in the southern hemisphere, all these conditions will be exactly reverse. It is winter season over there, and the nights will be longer than the days. This position is what is referred to as the summer solstice. Okay, so right answer is A. 1A is the right answer. Okay, moving on to the next question that we have, our question number 2. So the first question was from geography, physical geography, as you can understand. The second question that we have, consider the following statements. It is from UPSC Prelims 2019. There are 3 statements which have been given, and you have to find out which are the correct ones. Number 1, agricultural soils release nitrogen oxides into the environment. Agricultural soils release nitrogen oxides into the environment. Number 2, cattle release ammonia into environment. Number 3, poultry industry, they release reactive nitrogen compounds into the environment. So 3 statements are there. Number 1, agricultural soils, they release nitrogen oxides into the environment. Number 2, cattle, they release ammonia into the environment. And number 3, poultry industry, they release reactive nitrogen compounds into the environment. And you have to select which out of these are correct. So let us first have a look at the explanation part once again. Firstly, statement 1 is correct. What was statement 1? Quickly let us have a look. Agricultural soils, they release nitrogen oxides into the environment. How is that correct? Let us understand. You see, a major direct source of nitrous oxide from agricultural soils is that of synthetic fertilizer use. So how do the soils, how do they release nitrogen oxides? So a major direct source of nitrous oxides from agricultural soil is because of the use of synthetic fertilizers. Different type of fertilizers, especially the artificial chemical fertilizers, when they are used, what happens is these soils, they will release compounds or oxides of nitrogen. When large application of fertilizers are combined with soil conditions favorable to denitrification. What is denitrification? That is the breakdown of nitrogen compounds in the soil into atmospheric nitrogen. Okay, that is what is called as denitrification. Or what is nitrogen fixation? It is the opposite of denitrification. When we say nitrogen fixation, that means atmospheric nitrogen is getting changed, or it is getting converted into compounds, nitrogen compounds, which can be absorbed by plants and animals from the soil. That is your nitrogen fixation. On the other hand, when we say denitrification, that is the opposite of nitrogen fixation. So statement 1 is correct. A major direct source of nitrous oxides from agricultural soils is that of synthetic fertilizer use, where large applications of fertilizers are combined with soil conditions which are favorable to denitrification. What happens? Large amounts of nitrous oxide can be produced and emitted to the atmosphere. Okay, large amount of nitrous oxides will be produced and they will be emitted to the atmosphere. Second statement is also correct. What was the second statement? Let us have a look. It was with regards to cattle. That cattle release ammonia. So cattle, they release ammonia into environment. Is that correct? Yes, that is also correct. How? Ammonia, it is a common byproduct of animal waste due to the often inefficient conversion of feed nitrogen into animal products. So what happens is ammonia, it is a byproduct of animal waste. Remember that. Okay. Next, emission of ammonia from livestock farming. It is responsible for the acidification and eutrophication of deposited ammonia in the environment. So a lot of ammonia is emitted due to livestock farming, and as a result of which we get to see there is acidification of water bodies which take place, and not only that, but also we get to see eutrophication will also take place. What is eutrophication? Eutrophication is the enrichment of water bodies because of nutrient addition. Okay, so you can say nutrient enrichment of water bodies is what is called as eutrophication because of deposited nitrogen, because of deposited ammonia in the environment. There is a third statement as well. Poultry industry, it releases reactive nitrogen compounds into environment. So let us see over here. Poultry industry. Reactive nitrogen, it includes ammonia, nitrate, nitric oxide, nitrous oxide. All these things are there. So reactive nitrogen, what does it include? It includes ammonia, it includes nitrate, nitric oxide, nitrous oxide. All these are a part of reactive nitrogen. Livestock and poultry, they are both responsible for emission of all these different type of reactive nitrogen products. Okay, so reactive nitrogen, it includes ammonia, nitrate, nitric oxide, nitrous oxide, etc. Livestock and poultry are both responsible for the emission of these different nitrogen compounds. Okay, so all the three are correct, and D is the right answer. So 2D is the right answer. Moving on to the third question for today. The third question that we have is again asked, or it was again asked in UPSC 2019. Okay, and what does it ask? It says that what is common to the places which are known as Aliar, Isapur, and Kansabati? What is common to all these different three places? One is Aliar, one is Isapur, and the third is Kansabati. What is common? A. recently discovered uranium deposits, B. tropical rainforests, C. underground cave systems, and D. water reservoirs. So, which out of these are correct so far as these three places are concerned: Aliar, Isapur, and Kansabati? So, let us have a look. So, what is Aliar? Aliar, it is a village. Where is this located? It is located near the Polachi town in Coimbatore district in Tamil Nadu. The famous Aliar Reservoir is located in this village. Okay. So Aliar, what is it? It is a village. Where is it located? It is located near the Polachi town, which is in Coimbatore district of Tamil Nadu, India. And here we get to see that we have the famous Aliar Reservoir, which is present in this village. So Aliar mein what is there? Reservoir is there. Next, Isapur. Isapur Dam is an earth-filled dam on the Penganga River near Tusad in the state of Maharashtra. Okay? Isapur Dam, it is an earth-filled dam on the Penganga River near Tusad in the state of Maharashtra. The Kangsabati Reservoir project was started in 1956 as a part of the India's second five-year plan to provide water to 3,000, almost 3,500 square kilometers of land in the districts of Midnapur, erstwhile Midnapur, because now Midnapur has been broken down into two parts, East and West Midnapur. So erstwhile Midnapur, entire Midnapur, Bankura, Hooghly. So all these are the districts of West Bengal. Okay. So Kangsabati Reservoir project, it was started in 1956 as a part of India's second five-year plan to provide water to 3,500 square kilometers of land in the districts of Midnapur, Bankura, Hooghly. It involves irrigation land using water from the Kangsabati river as well as from Shilabati and Bhoirovati rivers. So basic thing over here is this: okay, all the three will have dams and reservoirs, and hence for question number 3, the right answer should be B, water reservoirs. Okay. Moving on to question number 4. In question number 4 we have, and this question was also asked in UPSC Prelims 2019. In the context of proposals to the use of hydrogen enriched CNG, in the context of proposals to the use of hydrogen enriched CNG, that is compressed natural gas, as fuel for buses in public transport, consider the following statements. So with regards to the use of hydrogen enriched compressed natural gases as fuel for buses in public transport, consider the following statements. There are 4 statements which have been given, and you have been you have been asked to find out the correct statement. First statement: the main advantage of the use of hydrogen enriched CNG, compressed natural gas, is the elimination of carbon monoxide emissions. The main advantage of the use of hydrogen enriched CNG or compressed natural gas is the elimination of carbon monoxide emission. Number 2, HCNG or hydrogen enriched CNG as fuel reduces carbon dioxide and hydrocarbon emissions. Third, hydrogen up to 1/5 by volume can be blended with CNG as fuel for buses. Hydrogen up to 1/5 by volume can be blended with CNG as fuel for buses. And number 4, hydrogen enriched CNG makes the fuel less expensive than CNG. Okay, so these are the 4 statements which have been provided. First, the main advantage of the use of hydrogen enriched CNG is the elimination of carbon monoxide emissions. Number 2, hydrogen enriched CNG as fuel reduces carbon dioxide and hydrocarbon emissions. Third, hydrogen up to 1/5 by volume can be blended with CNG as fuel for buses. And number 4, hydrogen enriched CNG makes the fuel less expensive than CNG, and you have to find out which out of these are correct. So the right answer is B. Now what is B? 2 and 3. So this one, it reduces carbon dioxide and hydrocarbon emission. That is correct. And 3, hydrogen up to 1/5 by volume can be blended with CNG as fuel for buses. Now let us examine each of these statements. First statement is not correct, and statements 2 and 3 are correct. How? Hydrogen enriched CNG, it is a blend of hydrogen and CNG. That much we can understand. A hydrogen enriched CNG, it is a blend of hydrogen and CNG. The ideal hydrogen concentration, how much should it be there? There should be 18%. Compared to conventional CNG, use of hydrogen enriched CNG can reduce emission of carbon monoxide up to 70% and 15% reduction in total hydrocarbon emissions, besides enabling up to 5% savings in fuel. All these things are possible. That is hydrogen enriched CNG is a blend of hydrogen and CNG, number one. The ideal hydrogen concentration, how much should be there? Around 18% should be there. Compared to conventional CNG, use of hydrogen enriched CNG can reduce emissions of carbon monoxide up to 70% and 15% reduction in the total hydrocarbon emissions, besides enabling up to 5% savings in fuel. Okay, let us try to understand over here. The main advantage of the use of hydrogen CNG is the elimination of, that was the first statement, was the elimination of carbon monoxide emission. Now, does it eliminate? No. It can reduce emission of carbon monoxide up to 70% and 15% emission reduction can be there in total hydrocarbon emission. Okay, so that is possible, but it will not result in elimination of carbon monoxide emission because that is incorrect. Okay. Next is hydrogen enriched CNG as fuel reduces carbon dioxide and hydrocarbon emission. Yes, that is correct, because right now we understood that 15% reduction will be there in total hydrocarbon emission. That is correct. Next, hydrogen up to 1/5 by volume can be blended with CNG as fuel for buses. So right now 1/5 by volume means how much? 20% by volume. So right now we have learned the ideal hydrogen concentration is around 18% in case of hydrogen enriched CNG. The fourth statement says that hydrogen enriched CNG makes the fuel less expensive than CNG. So let us examine this fourth statement. The statement number 4 is incorrect because in its report to the Supreme Court, the EPCA, Environment Pollution Control Authority, so EPCA has estimated that to fuel Delhi's 5,500 buses, about 400 tons of hydrogen CNG would be needed per day. Setting up 4 fuel dispensing facilities would cost around rupees 330 crore, which can be funded from the Environment Compensation Charge (ECC) fund, which is made up of cess on commercial vehicles entering Delhi. For consumers who pay rupees 42 per kg for CNG, the cost of hydrogen enriched CNG would not be more than rupees 43 per kg. So what we understood from here is this: hydrogen enriched CNG makes the fuel less expensive than CNG. That is incorrect, because hydrogen enriched CNG that would make the fuel, actually the price would rise a bit, because there are a lot of overheads involved in setting up of fuel dispensing facilities, etc. So that would increase the charges. So the fourth statement is actually incorrect. So the right answer is B, 2 and 3 only. Okay, that is for question number 4. Moving on to question number 5. Question number 5 is again from geography, and we have a question. This question was asked in UPSC Prelims 2019. The question asks, why are dewdrops not formed on a cloudy night? Why are dewdrops not formed on a cloudy night? A. Clouds absorb the radiation released from the Earth's surface. Okay? Clouds absorb the radiation which is released from the Earth's surface. B. Clouds reflect back the Earth's radiation. C. The Earth's surface would have low temperature on cloudy nights. And D. The clouds deflect the blowing wind to ground level. So why dewdrops are not formed on a cloudy night? A. Clouds absorb the radiation which is released from the Earth's surface. B. Clouds reflect back the Earth's radiation. C. The Earth's surface would have low temperature on cloudy nights. And D. Clouds deflect the blowing wind to ground level. Which out of these are correct or is correct? So if dewdrops need to be formed, you need to have condensation taking place. For condensation to take place, what needs to happen is this: एक तो ये है कि the humidity, the relative humidity should be sufficiently high. Okay, there should be sufficiently high humidity in the air, and not only that, not only humidity should be there, but alongside that, the temperature should fall sufficiently. For temperature of the Earth's surface to fall sufficiently, it is necessary that the heat which has been absorbed by the Earth's surface, that should get released. But what happens is that if you have a cloud cover, then when heat is released by the Earth's surface in the form of terrestrial radiation, a lot of this heat will be reflected back by the clouds. So the right answer ideally should be 5B. And what happens is when these clouds, they will reflect back the heat which is released during terrestrial radiation, the heat will not be able to escape out into space, and as a result of which the temperature of the Earth's surface will not fall sufficiently to ensure that there is condensation taking place. So answer is B. So what does it say? Let us see. Dew is not formed. Why? The atmosphere, which is heated by the absorption of Earth's radiation, in turn radiates back to the Earth's surface, increasing the Earth's surface temperature. On cloudy nights, so what happens? Dew is not formed because that atmosphere, which is heated by absorption of Earth's radiation, in turn radiates back heat back to the Earth's surface, increasing the Earth's surface temperature. On cloudy nights, because cloudy nights are warmer than clear nights, in shady places, because air cannot move there freely, in all these areas, what happens? On windy nights, because wind carries away the moist air, ultimately what happens? On all these cases, it is not possible for dewdrops to be formed. The atmosphere, which is heated by the absorption of Earth's radiation, in turn radiate back to the heat in so over here, first thing is that please understand there has been repetition in the a bit of typing mistake, but ultimate thing is that just try to understand this. What happens is, okay, the Earth is absorbing heat during the daytime. That heat the Earth will keep on absorbing like a black body. And what will happen is at night when the sun has set, that heat will be released by the Earth's surface in the form of terrestrial radiation. If there are clouds in the sky, the heat which is being released by the Earth's surface, that will not be able to escape out into the outer atmosphere. If there are clouds in the sky, all these clouds will reflect back the Earth's heat. And eventually what will happen is the Earth's surface will not be able to cool down sufficiently. If the Earth's surface is not able to get cooled down, then dewdrops cannot be formed. So for a dewdrop to be formed, you need to have a very cold night. For a cold night, you need to have cloudless sky. Cloudless sky is necessary. High relative heat is necessary. High relative humidity is necessary. Also, what is necessary is this: a temperature should fall, but the temperature fall should not be below the freezing point. Temperature ideally should fall, but it should not fall below the freezing point, because if it does, then you will not find the water vapor in the air condensing in the form of water droplets. Rather, the water in the air that will condense in the form of small ice particles. So it might form sleet, or it might form it might form frost or sleet, but it will not form dewdrops in that case. Okay. So there are a few conditions necessary. For example, there should be cloudless sky. The temperature should fall sufficiently, but not below the freezing point. There should be high relative humidity. Not too much of wind, because if there's too much of wind, then that will not allow sufficient humidity to be present in the air. That will blow off the humidity. So you need to have a calm atmosphere. That is necessary. Okay. So all these things are necessary for dewdrop formation. So with this, we complete the 5 questions for today. I hope you have liked the video. Please let us know in the comment section, and also please like and share this video with other friends of yours who are also preparing for UPSC Prelims 2020. Alongside that, you can also subscribe to Aptitude Academy for Civil Service YouTube channel for more such informative videos. We'll be back again with another episode of Prelims Warm Up. Till then, stay safe and have a very good day, and please study hard. Thank you so much.